I am so glad to see you today. We are going to continue our historical account through the book of Genesis today, and we're going to be learning about a man named Abram. But before we do, I need your help. We're going to set up our scene. Now, I've got the big scene out, but we need to add this tree. We're going to add this beautiful landscape of trees. Look at all those shades of green. There's a light green and dark green, and I even see some pink in there. And we're going to put it right over here in our scene. We'll add these two trees too. I mentioned that we're going to be talking about a man named Abram. And Abram lived in a town called Ur. And he lived there with his father and brothers, their wives and children, and Abram's wife Sarai. And Abram and Sarai, at this point in time, did not have any children. And even while they were in Ur, Abram loved God. Now, most of the people that were in the town of Ur did not love God. They worshiped a moon god. Now, that's not the one true God, but Abram stayed true to the one and only God. One day, Abram's father came to him and said that it was time for them to move, and they were going to be moving to Canaan. And so they packed up, and once they got all packed up, they got about halfway to where they were going, and they settled there. And Abram stayed in that town and that settlement until his father died. Now, while he was there, here's Abram. We'll put him over here. While he was there, he accumulated or collected a lot of animals. We call it livestock. Lots of cattle, sheep, camels, you name all kinds of animals Abram had. The Bible tells us he had a lot of silver and gold, so he was considered a very wealthy man. And his nephew Lot was there with him. And I'll put Lot right over here with Abram. And then I told you that Abram was married, and here's his wife, Sarai. And I told you that they had accumulated a lot of wealth. And one day, God told Abram that he wanted him to leave that place. Now, what you have to know is they didn't have moving trucks and big boxes like we have. They had their animals to carry stuff, and they had to walk. But it was also kind of confusing because God didn't tell Abram where to go. God just told him to leave. So I can imagine that Abram's wife might have said, "Where are we going? And what are we doing? What's the plan here?" But Abram just really was convicted that he needed to obey God no matter what. And so his servants loaded up and packed up their possessions. Let's see. And Abram had a lot of cattle. And Abram had to have people to help him. So he had servants. And these were people that took care of his animals for him, fed them, made sure they had plenty of water. imagine the conversation that they must have been having. We're going where? You mean he doesn't know? But they followed Abram. Oh, and I didn't show you this. This is like an ox cart. And we have the animals to carry or pull the cart. And Abram have some donkeys here, and we have a pack, and so I'm sure he had lots of these that were carrying food and whatnot. Put them a little over here, maybe closer to Sarai, and he also had his sheep. And so Abram, his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and their servants and all their livestock left where they were to go somewhere where they didn't know. Abram trusted God to lead them. Now, again, not only did Abram have a lot of livestock, cattle, sheep, donkeys, camels, but Lot also had accumulated a lot. And that started presenting a little bit of a problem. I'm going to have to change out our board, so we'll work on being patient while I do that. You can change this scene up and it makes it look so different so quickly. I appreciate your patience, and I dropped Lot. There he is. He had fallen on the floor. And I'm going to take this scene off. And while Lot and Abram are living together, caring for their livestock, problems start developing. Some of these will be familiar, but we can use them over and over. Got our big tree landscape. We have this. There we go. And so Abram and Lot were moving, obeying God. And it got to the point where there wasn't enough green grass for the cows and the sheep and all to eat. And so Abram recognized this as a problem. And what had happened was their herdsmen, their servants, started fighting amongst one another. And Abram didn't want the people in the area to know that they were fighting like that, and he came up with a solution. Now, God had already worked in Abram's heart, and Abram made an important decision. And he said to Lot, he said, "You see that land over there to the east?" And he pointed over to this side. He said, "You see that land?" He said, "Look at that land. Look at the land we've been in. Look to the west. And you get to choose where you want to live. You get to pick." And Lot may have wrestled with that a little bit, but he could see how green this was. And by the way, I want to put this tree up because this represents they were in a totally different kind of location. So let's put that up too. I want to make sure I do that. And Lot looked and he thought, and he chose the best land. So that meant that his uncle Abram, didn't have as much grass in the area for his cattle, didn't have as much water, and Lot chose what was, in his mind's eye, the best. Well, Lot didn't know exactly that this city was nearby that was very wicked. And the Bible tells us, let me show you this, that represents a city. He didn't know that, but he chose that land. And so Abram and Lot separated. And Abram went to the west, and Lot went to the east. God had told Abram one time when they were talking, he said, look at all of the land. He said, one day I'm going to give it all to you. You see, Abram was always about listening and obeying God. Now, Abram wasn't perfect, and Abram did make mistakes. But Abram's heart was to obey God. And he did it even if it meant splitting up his family so they could go their separate ways. It meant leaving an area where he was comfortable, where he knew people, and setting out on a different adventure. I'm going to put our Bible verse for today down below and the links, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, I want you to notice what it feels like when you let someone else choose first. Sometimes that can be really hard, but we can follow Abram's example here and learn from him. I will look forward to seeing you soon.